The wind howled through the trees like a cry of mourning, tearing at the edges of Cinderella's torn gown. The glass slipper she once wore was gone, swallowed by mud and memory. Beneath the bruised sky, she stumbled through the undergrowth, her heart pounding louder than the thunder that rolled across the distance. The grand ballroom, the prince, the shimmering promise of a new life vanished into the night. All that remained now was the forest, vast, dark, and alive with whispers. Behind her, somewhere far beyond the black branches, the palace bells tolled midnight again. Or perhaps it was only her mind replaying the moment everything had changed. She had run, away from kindness, away from cruelty, away from fate itself, until the forest took her. The scent of damp earth and moss filled her lungs, and every shadow seemed to move with intent. The night was no longer a place of dreams, but a maze of fear. Then came the sound, soft, deliberate, close, a breath that was not her own. Cinderella froze, clutching the edge of her torn skirt, her pulse trembling in her throat. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice barely breaking the silence. No answer came, only the rustle of leaves and the glint of two pale eyes watching her from the dark. In that moment, she knew. The fairy tale had ended, and the true story had just begun. The moon slipped behind the clouds, stealing the light from Cinderella's trembling hands. Her bare feet left faint impressions on the muddy ground as she tried to find the road she had come from. But the path was gone, swallowed by roots and fog. Every tree looked the same, ancient and watching. Panic rose like cold water inside her chest. Branches clawed at her arms as she pushed forward, searching for the faintest sign of escape. She called out for help, her voice scattering among the leaves. Only the echo of her fear returned to her ears. The air was thick, wet and heavy with the scent of decay. The forest was no place for a dreamer in silk. She stumbled upon a broken cart, half buried in the soil. The wood was splintered, the wheels rotted through. Someone had been here before, someone who never made it out. The realization struck her harder than the cold wind. She wasn't the first to be lost, and she might not be the last. The eyes she had seen in the dark still haunted her. She turned in circles, clutching a broken branch like a weapon. The forest whispered her name, or perhaps mocked her with its mimicry. "Cinderella!" The sound drifted like smoke. Her heart thundered against her ribs. She backed into a tree, the bark rough against her shoulders. Something moved behind her, a low shuffle of leaves, too steady for the wind. "Show yourself!" she cried, her voice cracking. Silence. Then a single feather drifted to her feet, silver as frost. It shimmered faintly, otherworldly. When she reached to touch it, the forest breathed again. A gust tore through the trees, scattering her hair across her face. The feather vanished. The night seemed to close in tighter, as though the woods themselves had inhaled her presence. And in that stillness, she felt it. The forest was alive, and it knew her name. At dawn, she found the river. Its surface glimmered like shards of a broken mirror, reflecting fragments of sky. Thirst drove her to her knees, and she drank greedily. The water burned cold, biting her tongue, but it steadied her breath. For the first time since the palace, she felt alive. Across the river, a faint figure watched her, a silhouette draped in mist. She blinked, and it vanished. Only footprints remained on the opposite bank, too large to be her own. Fear urged her to move, but curiosity chained her there. Was it friend or phantom? She could not tell. She crossed the shallow current, clutching her skirt above her knees. The water's pull was gentle but insistent, like unseen fingers guiding her onward. When she reached the far side, she saw something caught between the reeds. A single glass slipper, cracked but real. Her past had followed her here. The forest grew stranger as she walked. The air shimmered with faint whispers that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Words she couldn't understand, tangled with her thoughts, seeding confusion. "Turn back," they hissed, "or be swallowed whole." She pressed her hands over her ears, but the voices sank through skin and bone. The trees leaned inward, their gnarled faces stretching toward her. Fear clawed at her reason, but she refused to stop. She had run from cruelty before. She would not bow to the forest's tricks. At the grove's center stood a fallen oak, its trunk hollow and glimmering faintly inside. The air within pulsed like breath. Against her better judgment, she reached in and touched something warm. It was a locket, etched with her initials, though she had never seen it before. The locket clicked open on its own. Inside was a portrait of a woman, gentle-eyed, regal, and hauntingly familiar. The same blue eyes, the same golden hair. A whisper stirred beside her ear. She was meant to find it. Cinderella dropped the locket, her heart hammering. The portrait's eyes glowed faintly before the image dissolved into light. It swirled around her fingers, forming patterns that looked like constellations. Somewhere deep inside, something awakened, an ache she had buried long ago. Could it be her mother? Could the forest know her blood? When the light faded, words were carved into the soil at her feet. The lost air must remember her path. Her throat tightened. She was no longer a servant girl running from a ball. She was part of something older, bound to the forest's will, and destiny was calling her name. Night fell again before she dared to stop. She built a small fire from fallen twigs, shivering beside it. For the first time in hours, warmth touched her skin. The flames flickered, revealing a shadow just beyond their reach. Someone was there. "Who are you?" she asked, gripping a stone. The figure stepped closer. A man cloaked in leaves and leather, his face hidden behind a hood. "A traveler," he said, his voice calm but wary. "You shouldn't be here." His gaze lingered on the locket in her hand. She sensed he knew more than he let on. "You've been following me," she accused. The man didn't deny it. "The forest has been waiting for you," he said softly. "And not everything that walks these woods wishes you alive." His words chilled her more than the night wind. The stranger called the place Eldergreen, a forest older than kings, where time bent and destiny twisted its roots. "Few who enter ever return," he said, feeding the fire with dry moss. "Those who do are never the same." Cinderella listened, torn between fear and awe. He spoke of guardians, spirits that watched over the trees, punishing intruders who carried greed or deceit. "But you," he added, "you are different. The forest recognizes you." She shook her head, denying it. "I'm no one. Just a girl who lost her way." Yet deep down, she wasn't sure. When he left her to rest, she studied the stars through the canopy. Their light seemed to form a path above her, faint and trembling. The lost air must remember her path. The words echoed in her mind like a heartbeat. Maybe she hadn't stumbled here by accident. Cinderella woke to the sound of wings, massive, beating, close. The fire was out, the stranger gone. The trees swayed violently as if bowing to something unseen. She looked up and for an instant saw a creature glide between the branches. White feathers, golden eyes, enormous and radiant. It circled once, then vanished behind a veil of mist. The silence that followed was deafening. She wanted to believe she'd imagined it, but the feathers that drifted down were warm to the touch. The same silver hue as the one she'd found that first night. Something powerful watched over her. Perhaps it was the forest itself, or something trapped within it. Either way, she felt it in her bones. The forest wasn't only danger, it was also protection, waiting for her to understand its purpose. Later that day, she came upon a pool so still it reflected the sky perfectly. Exhausted, she knelt beside it, tracing circles on the surface. Ripples spread outward, and the reflection shifted. Not her face, but the palace ballroom shimmered below the water. She saw herself dancing again, radiant and free. The prince smiled, whispering words she couldn't hear. But then the image fractured, showing the stepmother's face, cold and cruel. "You were never meant to belong," the reflection hissed. The voice was hers, and not hers. Cinderella reached into the water, and the illusion shattered. The surface froze instantly, locking her reflection beneath the ice. Her breath caught as she saw a symbol appear in the frost, a crown of thorns and light. Whatever this forest wanted from her, it was far from over. As night descended once more, she stood at the forest's edge, or what she thought was the edge. Beyond the trees stretched only mist and moonlight. There was no exit, only a circle that brought her back where she began. The forest was holding her prisoner. The locket pulsed faintly, and she heard her mother's voice, soft as a lullaby. To find yourself, you must lose what you were. Tears blurred her sight, but she didn't wipe them away. She sank to her knees and whispered into the wind, "Then I will not run any more." In that moment, the forest stirred. The ground beneath her glowed faintly with veins of light. She felt the pulse of something ancient answering her courage. The wind softened, almost approving. Cinderella rose, her fear melting into resolve. The forest had tested her, and she had survived. By dawn, the forest had changed. The trees no longer twisted in menace, but leaned toward her as if guiding her steps. Roots rose from the ground, weaving a narrow trail that glowed faintly with light. It was as though Eldergreen had opened a secret passage only she could walk. Every step carried the echo of her heartbeat through the soil. She could feel the pulse of life beneath her feet. Ancient, patient, alive. The trees whispered softly, not in warning now, but in recognition. They called her Child of the Hollow Star, though she didn't understand why. At the end of the glowing path stood a circle of stones, each etched with runes that shimmered in the mist. When she touched one, warmth flooded her palm. A vision flashed before her eyes, a queen in a silver crown standing in this very place. "You must finish what I could not," the vision whispered. The vision left her trembling. She turned her palm over and saw a faint symbol burned into her skin, a crescent moon entwined with thorns. It pulsed gently, alive. Somehow, she felt her blood remember something her mind could not. The stranger returned at sunset, watching her from a distance. "You touched the stones," he said, his tone unreadable. "Then it's true. The forest has chosen you." Cinderella demanded to know what that meant, but he only sighed. "You carry the mark of the lost queen, the first ruler of Eldergreen?" Her throat tightened. "I'm no queen." But the symbol glowed brighter at her denial, answering her fear with defiance. The stranger bowed slightly, his gaze full of pity. "Then you will have to become one before the forest consumes you?" His words lingered like a promise and a curse. They traveled together through the thickest parts of Eldergreen. The ground crackled with ancient energy, vines moving as if alive. The stranger spoke of an old prophecy, a girl of ash and glass who would awaken the forest's heart and free it from decay. "Your world above has forgotten," he said, glancing at her worn gown. "But beneath it lies a kingdom buried in roots and silence." Cinderella listened, torn between disbelief and wonder. Could her life of servitude and sorrow be part of something this vast? When they reached a ravine, the path ended abruptly. Below, the earth pulsed red like a beating heart. "The heart of thorns," he whispered. "The forest's pain made flesh." Cinderella felt drawn to it, even as it terrified her. The forest's wound called to her own. As they camped that night, a figure emerged from the shadows. A woman cloaked in ivy, her skin pale as bark. The stranger fell to one knee. "Keeper?" he murmured. The woman's eyes glowed like lanterns in fog. She studied Cinderella in silence before speaking. "The forest remembers your blood." Cinderella's pulse quickened. "You know who I am?" The keeper nodded. "Daughter of Leora, last queen of Eldergreen, hidden by magic, raised among mortals." The words shattered her breath. Her mother, the woman from the locket, had been real and powerful. "But why me?" Cinderella asked, voice trembling. The keeper's gaze softened. "Because you were meant to return when the forest began to die. And now it does." The ground trembled as if confirming the truth. "If you do not awaken its heart, Eldergreen will fade forever." The keeper led her to a clearing where ancient roots formed a spiral into the ground. "Your trials begin here," she said. 3 tests to awaken the heart. Cinderella's knees weakened, but she nodded. She had already faced cruelty and fire. She would face this too. The first trial was of fear. She stepped into the spiral, and darkness swallowed her whole. When she opened her eyes, she was back in her stepmother's house. The cinders, the cruelty, the endless servitude, it all surrounded her once more. "You will never be more than dust," the phantom stepmother sneered. Cinderella closed her eyes, pressing her palm to the mark on her hand. "I am not dust," she whispered. "I am flame." The illusion shattered like glass, and she rose from the ashes unburned. The forest whispered her name again, this time in reverence. The second trial came without warning. The air thickened, and she stood before a mirror made of water. In its surface, she saw 2 versions of herself, the servant girl and the queen. "Which are you?" the reflection asked. "Which will you abandon?" She stared, torn apart by the question. Could she truly become something greater without betraying who she was? The forest's wind pressed against her back, urging her forward. Slowly she touched the water's surface, merging the 2 reflections into one. "I am both," she declared. "My pain does not chain me. It crowns me." The water rippled, glowing with silver light. The reflection smiled before fading into the depths. When she stepped away, the mark on her hand burned brighter, as though the forest approved. Only one trial remained. The keeper warned her. To awaken the heart, something must be given that cannot be returned. Cinderella's stomach twisted. "What must I give?" The keeper's eyes softened with sorrow. "The forest will decide." The air grew cold as she descended deeper into the roots. At the core lay a pool of crimson light, the heart itself. It pulsed weakly, surrounded by thorns dripping with golden sap. A voice rose from within, ancient and weary. "Will you give what you love most?" She thought of the prince, of freedom, of her mother's face. Then she thought of the forest, dying and waiting. With trembling resolve, she pressed her palm against the thorns. "If life must have a cost, let it be mine." Pain seared through her, but the heart began to glow anew. Light erupted from the ground, piercing through the trees like dawn breaking through 1,000 years of night. The thorns withdrew, revealing roots of pure gold that pulsed with life. Cinderella collapsed, gasping, her hands bathed in light. The forest sang, a sound both joyous and mournful. The stranger rushed to her side. "You did it," he whispered. But the keeper's face was grave. "The awakening has begun, but so has the storm." The forest, reborn, trembled with new power. Every leaf shivered under the force of it. Cinderella rose unsteadily. The mark on her hand had spread, curling up her arm like living vines. "What happens now?" she asked. The keeper met her eyes. "Now, the forest will test if you are worthy to rule it." The wind howled through Eldergreen, tearing branches from their trunks. The rebirth had awakened not just life, but chaos. Lightning danced across the sky, striking the earth like silver spears. The forest spirits rose from the soil, half shadow, half flame. Cinderella stood firm, her gown torn, but her eyes fierce. "I will not let you fall again," she shouted into the storm. The stranger fought beside her, blades of light in his hands, cutting through the shadows that tried to drag her down. The forest cried out, its pain and renewal clashing in violent harmony. Cinderella pressed her glowing hand to the earth, channeling her strength into the roots. "Be still," she whispered. The wind faltered, the ground calmed, and slowly, life began to bloom again. When dawn returned, Eldergreen was alive. Flowers the size of stars unfurled across the forest floor. Rivers ran clear, the air sweet again. The keeper approached, bowing low. The heart beats once more, and so does its queen. Cinderella shook her head, tears glimmering in her eyes. I didn't do this alone. The stranger smiled faintly. A true ruler never does. The vines that had mocked her arm now formed a delicate crown upon her brow. It shimmered between gold and ash, fragile, powerful, earned. She looked upon the reborn forest, humbled. Then let this crown be not of power, she said softly, but of promise. The trees bowed as the sun broke through the canopy, lighting her face with dawn fire. Cinderella, once lost and forgotten, had become the heart of Eldergreen itself. For several days, peace ruled Eldergreen. The rivers glistened, and the winds sang soft hymns beneath the canopy. Yet in that quiet, Cinderella felt an unease settle like a shadow at her back. The forest was too still, as if holding its breath. The stranger noticed it too. The heart beats, but something resists, he said, touching the ground. There are roots that won't awaken. Cinderella knelt beside him, pressing her palm to the soil. The mark on her arm flickered weakly. The light within her was fading. That night, even the stars dimmed above the trees. Dreams came to her, visions of the palace, of the prince calling her name, of chains of silver wrapped around the forest's roots. She woke with tears in her eyes and a terrible truth in her heart. The curse had not yet ended. At dawn, she saw him. Standing at the edge of the glade was the prince, cloaked in mist. His eyes were kind, just as she remembered. You found me, she whispered, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. You should never have left. She ran to him, but when she touched his hand, it was cold as stone. The forest recoiled, branches snapping like ribs around them. You are not him, she said, voice trembling. The phantom's grin widened, twisting into something cruel. He dreams of you still, and I feed on dreams. The figure shattered into smoke, vanishing into the roots. The forest groaned, ancient pain echoing through its veins. Cinderella clutched her chest, gasping. The illusion had shown her what she most desired, to trap her in it. The curse uses my heart against me, she whispered. Then I must learn to master it. The keeper appeared again, her expression heavy. Eldergreen is reborn, but its corruption was not born here. It came from the world beyond. Cinderella frowned. The world beyond? You mean the kingdom? The keeper nodded. When humans abandoned balance, they broke the forest's bond. The prince's realm draws its power from Eldergreen's life, the keeper continued, and now that you've awakened it, they will come to claim it. Cinderella's heart ached. The palace, the dream she once chased, was now the forest's greatest danger. The stranger unsheathed his blade, its edge humming faintly. If they come, we'll fight. But the keeper shook her head. No blade can cut what is rooted in greed. She must face them with truth, Cinderella nodded solemnly. Then truth will be my weapon. To find the source of the curse, Cinderella had to remember the night she fled. The forest led her back to where she'd first entered, the place where her glass slipper had been swallowed by the mud. The air was thick with echoes. She saw herself again, running in terror, her gown torn, her breath ragged. But now she saw what she hadn't before. A trail of silver threads leading from the palace gates to the forest's edge. Magic had guided her here that night, not chance. Someone wanted her to find Eldergreen. Following the threads, she reached a forgotten well choked with vines. The air shimmered with an unseen power. Mother, she whispered, was it you who brought me here? A single petal fell from the canopy, landing on the water. It glowed once before sinking. Her mother's answer was silence, but full of love. Beneath the well, she found a tunnel. The stranger helped her descend, the air cold and damp around them. The walls pulsed with veins of silver light, like the forest's lifeblood exposed. It was beautiful, and broken. Cracks ran deep, leaking shadows instead of light. "This is where the curse sleeps," he said softly. Cinderella reached out, and the shadows flinched from her touch. They whispered her name in 1,000 broken voices. "They fear you," the stranger murmured. "Then let them remember why," she replied, standing tall. She pressed her hand against the cracked wall. The light spread from her mark, filling the tunnel. Memories flooded through her mother sealing the curse, the forest begging for salvation, and the prince's kingdom feeding on Eldergreen's heart. The curse was a bridge, and she was the key. The tunnel ended at a towering arch of crystal. Its surface rippled like water, showing flashes of the world beyond. The palace, the gardens, the prince asleep beside an empty throne. "The mirror gate," said the stranger. "It binds both realms." Cinderella stepped closer. The reflection showed her as she was, a queen crowned with vines, eyes bright as dawn. But behind her image, shadows gathered. 1,000 faces of those who had entered the forest and never returned stared back at her. "They're trapped," she whispered, "because of this gate." The keeper's voice echoed faintly from the mist. "To free them you must break the mirror, but doing so will shatter both worlds." Cinderella closed her eyes. "Then I must find another way." The mirror pulsed as if listening. It would not yield easily. When they emerged from the tunnel, the forest was wilting again. Leaves browned, streams darkened, and the air carried a faint scent of rot. "The curse is fighting back," said the stranger grimly. At the forest's center, a single black flower had bloomed. It pulsed with darkness, spreading veins of shadow across the ground. "The poison heart," the keeper called it. "It feeds on your doubt." Cinderella stared at it, trembling. Each beat of the flower mirrored the ache in her chest. It was alive because her fear was. She dropped to her knees, clutching the soil. "I will not let my heart destroy what I love." The mark on her arm blazed, light searing through the darkness. The flower screamed, twisting violently before bursting into dust. But Cinderella collapsed, her strength drained by the effort. As she lay unconscious, the stranger carried her to the riverbank. The forest wept quietly, rain falling like sorrow. When she woke, his cloak was wrapped around her shoulders. His eyes glowed faintly beneath the dawn light. "You shouldn't have faced it alone," he said softly. "I had to," she murmured. "It was my fear, not yours." He looked away. "You still don't understand who I am, do you?" He removed his hood, revealing not a man, but a spirit of the forest itself, his hair woven with roots, his skin marked by bark. "I was once the forest's guardian," he said. "Your mother bound me here to protect you until you were ready." Tears welled in her eyes. "And now?" He smiled sadly. "Now you no longer need me, but I will stand by you until the end." With the truth revealed, Cinderella knew what she had to do. The mirror gate had to be purified, not broken. "If it connects both realms, then both must be healed," she said. The forest answered with a low hum, approving her resolve. She and the guardian returned to the crystal arch, its surface rippling like a living thing. Cinderella stepped before it, raising the locket that had started it all. "Through my mother's memory, through the forest's heart, I offer peace." The mirror trembled violently. Shadows poured out, clawing at her light, but she stood firm. The vines on her arms spread outward, wrapping around the gate. The locket burst into radiant flame, melting into the glass. With a sound like thunder and weeping, the mirror began to shine. The mirror shattered, not into ruin, but into light. Each fragment drifted upward, becoming stars that wove themselves through the forest canopy. The roots beneath her feet pulsed with gold, linking both worlds with a single breath. The curse was undone. Cinderella fell to her knees, exhausted but free. The guardian knelt beside her, his form fading into mist. "The forest no longer needs a keeper," he said softly. "You have become its heart." She reached for him, but her hand passed through his fading light. "Thank you," she whispered. When she looked up, dawn spilled across Elder Green. Birds sang again, rivers laughed, and the air smelled of renewal. She stood tall, her crown of vines glimmering with dew. No longer lost, she said, no longer afraid. And the forest answered with sunlight. The forest was quiet again, yet Cinderella felt the echo of footsteps where none walked. The world beyond Elder Green was stirring. Through the shimmer of mist, she saw the distant silhouette of the palace, unchanged, but somehow hollow. Her past called out to her. She stood at the forest's border, the light of dawn painting her gown in hues of gold and green. For the first time, the boundary did not repel her. It beckoned. The trees leaned aside, parting a path between realms. The forest whispered, "Go, child of the hollow star." Her heart ached with uncertainty. Could she truly return to the world that once broke her? Or had she become something that no longer belonged there? She touched her mark, feeling its gentle warmth. Whatever awaited her, she would face it with truth. Cinderella crossed the threshold, and the air changed. Thin, dry, empty. The palace loomed before her, its marble cracked and its windows veiled in cobwebs. The kingdom she remembered had withered without its connection to Elder Green's life. Inside, the grand hall stood silent. The chandeliers hung low, heavy with dust. She could still see faint footprints from the night of the ball, hers and the prince's, frozen in time. The music was gone, but the memory lingered like a ghost. She climbed the staircase to the throne room, each step echoing like a heartbeat in a tomb. At the top sat the prince, head bowed, his crown tarnished. He stirred as she entered, disbelief flooding his tired eyes. "Cinderella?" he breathed. "Or am I dreaming again?" Cinderella knelt before him, tears in her eyes. "Not a dream," she said softly, "but not the girl you knew either." The prince rose unsteadily, reaching for her hand. "Where have you been?" "The kingdom fell into ruin after you vanished." "I was lost," she whispered, "but not without purpose." "The forest called me home." He frowned, confusion shadowing his face. "The forest? That cursed place? It devoured everyone who entered?" She smiled faintly. "And yet, it gave me back my soul." She touched the crown on his head, and the metal crumbled into dust. "You built this kingdom on what was stolen from life itself," she said. "It's time to rebuild, not rule." His eyes filled with regret. "Then show me how." Days turned into weeks as Cinderella worked beside the prince to heal the land. She brought water from Elder Green's rivers, planting seeds that glowed with faint silver light. Where they fell, grass grew, and the air smelled of spring again. People began to return from hiding, thin, weary, but full of wonder. They saw the forest's queen walking among them, her gown woven with vines that shimmered like moonlight. Children followed her, laughing as flowers bloomed beneath her steps. Hope returned to the soil. The prince watched her from afar, humbled. "You've done what no crown could," he told her one evening. She smiled gently. "Because true rule isn't command, it's care." Her words rooted themselves deeper than any decree ever could. Elder Green and the kingdom began to merge again. Paths of light stretched between tree and tower, river and street. The boundaries of nature and man softened. It was not one world conquering another. It was harmony reborn. Cinderella walked those paths daily, listening to both hearts, the forest's ancient song and the kingdom's fragile pulse. They spoke to her in different tongues, yet shared one truth, that life must always balance itself. She had become their bridge, their voice, their guide. But with her bond came burden. The mark on her arm began to fade, as though the magic that bound her was releasing its hold. The forest was healing and no longer needed her as its vessel. She felt both peace and sorrow in that fading light. One night, under a canopy of stars, the forest called to her one last time. The trees rustled with voices soft as memory. "Child of the hollow star," they said, "your task is complete." The air shimmered with silver light. Cinderella stood by the river's edge, her reflection split between woman and spirit. "Must I leave?" she whispered. The water rippled in answer, showing her mother's face once more, smiling, radiant, proud. "Every story must find its rest, my daughter." She knelt, tears glistening in her eyes. "If my rest means peace for both worlds, then I will go." The wind wrapped around her gently, as though in embrace. Leaves swirled, lifting her hair like a crown of farewell. The forest sang her name in mourning. At dawn, she returned to the palace to say goodbye. The prince met her at the gates, his face pale with dread. "You're leaving," he said, though it was not a question. She nodded. "Eldergreen no longer needs me, and neither does the crown." He reached for her hand. "I do." His voice broke like glass. "Stay, and we can build this world together." She smiled sadly. "Then build it as I did, through kindness, not command. You have that power within you." She pressed her palm to his heart, and the mark on her skin glowed one final time. "You once gave me freedom by love. Now I return it by letting go." He wept openly as she turned toward the forest's light. "Goodbye, my dream," she whispered. The forest welcomed her with open arms. The path beneath her feet glowed faintly, leading toward the circle of stones where her journey had begun. The keeper awaited her, silent and serene. "The cycle closes," she said. "You have restored balance." Cinderella smiled through her tears. "Then let this place live beyond me." She placed the locket, now empty of light, on the central stone. The vines around the grove bloomed, spiraling upward into a radiant tree that shone like dawn. The keeper bowed deeply. "Your story will be whispered in every leaf." Cinderella stepped into the tree's glow, feeling the warmth of every memory, every loss, every triumph. Her body dissolved into light, but her soul became the forest's eternal breath. Years passed, and the world changed. The kingdom flourished beside Eldergreen, its people learning to live with the forest, not against it. Children were told tales of the queen who walked between worlds, the girl of ash and glass who saved them all. In spring, when the sun struck the great silver tree, petals would fall in the shape of tiny glass slippers. The elders said it was her spirit walking among them, blessing their harvest. None entered the forest in fear anymore, but in reverence, and sometimes, on quiet nights, travelers swore they heard a woman's laughter among the leaves, a sound both human and divine. The keeper would smile and whisper, "She watches still." Deep within Eldergreen, where roots cradle the heart of the world, a faint light burns eternal. It is neither fire nor magic, but memory. It glows with the warmth of a girl who was once lost, who found herself in the forest's embrace. The wind carries her story in every whisper, every rustle of leaves. The rivers hum her lullaby, and the stars bend low to listen. The forest no longer mourns, it remembers, and remembrance is its truest form of love. Above, in the kingdom reborn, flowers bloom each spring in the pattern of a crown, of ash and light. And somewhere, unseen but ever near, Cinderella smiles. The girl who was lost had become forever found.